We're really excited to have Jessica Hernandez joining us here today. Jessica, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here and share my story.
Yeah, and before we do that, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, your job, your occupation, and where you live?
Yeah, so I'm actually originally from Brooklyn, New York, and I am an emergency medicine physician. And I've been out for a little bit over 10 years now from training. And about 7 years ago, I moved to Dallas, Texas. And so that's where I'm based now, is out of Dallas.
So, Jessica, can you tell everyone how you got interested in real estate in the first place?
Yeah, so it started about, let's see, I mean, I would say 2017 is kind of when it really started. And that was really a direct result of my husband and I. We moved out of our first home and we had moved into our second home, and we kind of had to make a decision about what we were going to do about our first home. So the options are sell it, kind of just move on to the next, or hold on to it and rent it out. So at that point, we decided, hey, let's try to hold on to it and rent it out. We always thought it was a good investment. It was in a good location, downtown Dallas. And so we were like, let's test that market and see what it looks like. So we rented out that first place, and kind of simultaneously around that time, I started, just learning a little bit more about real estate, because we were having our own rental. And I started looking at the semi-retired blog actually, and just kind of snooping around there and kind of joining the communities that were from that. And so that's kind of how I started learning about it. I actually didn't start ramping up my real estate career until I would say 2020. And so over that time, my interest in real estate was growing, and, was thinking about pursuing that more with my husband. But unfortunately, he was diagnosed with lymphoma in 2018, and he passed away in 2019. So all of that stuff was kind of put on the back burner, and we were, kind of at that time trying to fight cancer and trying to get him well. When he passed away in 2019, towards the end of 2019 is when I really started saying, hey, I need to grow wealth. I need to, kind of make up for the fact that he's not here. We have two children. So I really started diving into the real estate world at that time. And so actually there was a meetup here in Dallas for real estate that you had hosted. And since I was already following the blog and following your guys' posts and part of that community, kind of, lurking because you guys were coming into Dallas, that was in my backyard. So I was like, well, I cannot go to this. I mean, it's literally, 20-minute drive from where I live. And so there we met up there, and kind of I learned even more about, the possibilities with real estate, kind of opened my eyes to different avenues. And so that's when I started saying, hey, I really need to educate myself in this space, and very quickly. So that's when I started kind of making moves and, taking different courses in real estate and just learning about different things that you can do with real estate. And so 2020 was really my year where I ramped it up and really went full throttle.
And in 2020, what made the change for you that you decided to go kind of full throttle, as you say, in 2020?
Yeah, well, it was really, I mean, honestly, it was because of COVID. So it was a combination of, I had already, I was already kind of primed and almost ready to go, because I had, my interest was there. I had started learning about it. I took some courses starting at the end of 2019, thinking about investing in syndications and also doing direct real estate. And so one of them being your course, I took at the end of 2019, beginning of 2020. And so I kind of started laying that groundwork. And when COVID hit, I kind of was thinking overall, I was like, okay, I'm going to build up slowly. I'm getting this education under my belt. And then, I will start, building up, get one property, and start, just putting the model down, using that template. And when COVID hit in 2020, being an ER doctor, a recent widow, I felt a ton of pressure and anxiety thinking about going to work. My mom was like, can't you take a break? And I was like, well, I don't really have anything else lined up in terms of a job. And so when I did work, I batched my shifts together, I isolated from the kids. But at the same time, I was like, I need a plan B. I need to have flexibility. I need to if I need to exit medicine, I need to have something that I can fall back on. And I anticipated that likely, COVID was only going to get worse over the months, and that even if I, was working, that there might be a time where I'd have to pull away. And so I said, okay, real estate is it. That's what I've been starting to work towards. And then there was all these opportunities that came up because of COVID in terms of tax savings and things of that nature. And so I was like, okay, I get, this is what I'm going to do. And so one of my goals became to obtain real estate professional tax status for myself in the year 2020. So I was supposed to be working, 3/4 to full time as an ER doctor, but I actually remained part-time at that time and didn't increase my hours. And so I decided to put those hours into real estate.
And I remember those pictures of you isolating from your kids and them staying with your mom, and you really like communicating with them through as like a sliding door. And that really sticks out to me, like, what you went through, and a lot of doctors went through at that time, the stress and
I remember there was so much uncertainty and fear, and we didn't know what was going on. And I mean, I remember coming home a lot of times and just like going straight to the shower and and leaving all our stuff in the garage. And yeah, I think a lot of doctors can probably relate and share that similar kind of story. So yeah.
It was definitely challenging and scary, and we didn't know. And that was the things that we didn't know. And so it was kind of an abundance of caution. I was, my kids were now home, having to be home. And then my childcare was my mother-in-law and my mom and my grandma. And I have a high risk job. I didn't want to expose them. I didn't want to expose the kids. And so it was really, just a lot of anxiety. I had never felt so scared to go to work before. And I feel like a lot of people felt that way. And then maybe some people who didn't feel that way also felt a lot of that kind of instability with their job, which, medicine has for so long been so stable. But that was kind of a little bit of an illusion, and that really kind of brought that into focus, I think, for a lot of people.
Also, I want to highlight about your story is, we do a lot of mindset work in our community, but you also came and did a lot of other mindset work with us with Tony Robbins events and stuff like that. Like, how did that affect, what you were going through during that time, and then leading into your real estate portfolio?
Honestly, that was the crux of it, right? Because I'm sure that you can say that when you first met me, I was really scared. There was a lot of there was anxiety around my husband's death. There was anxiety around money. There was fear of losing money, pressure, a lot of pressure in general that I took on myself. And so, going to those events were really just a godsend for me, because I really was able to kind of just surround myself surround myself with people that, could just kind of have this abundance mindset and this growth mindset and this like, hey, we can do anything we put our mind to. And, just, feeling all this fear of like, oh, I don't know about real estate. I don't know about finances. I can't, and I'm just like, when you look back and you're like, look at all that I've accomplished. I mean, we're doctors, and, all of that grueling work and all of that, I can't do that. I can't be a doctor, like that's kind of all the mentality. And we've already worked through that and gotten here. So it's like, if we can do that, like we can do most things. And then, I really did feel like I kind of walked through the fire with my husband's illness. And, I'm also personally a cancer survivor. So, those things, like just looking back at those pieces of evidence that are there and say, hey, just because I'm doing something different and new and I'm in this new space, it doesn't mean that I can't do it. And the other thing is I really felt alone, like I had to do it alone. But I think I realized that when you surround yourself with like-minded people and a community to support you, that you're really, there are steps that you take alone, but you have support and you're really not alone. And there's so many people that, I just kind of call up and, ask a question or, ask for a meeting. And so many people are willing to give their time and energy, to help. And sometimes you just got to like, let it all in. So it was a matter of working on myself, my own mindset, taking steps when I was uncomfortable, and surrounding myself with a supportive community, and also just accepting that I'm going to make mistakes, and that's normal. We always want to do things perfectly and life is messy. And I think if anything, that's what I've learned, is that life, the messiness of life just also makes it rich and beautiful. And so there's happiness and there's pain and there's success and there's what we call failure, but it all pushes us to grow in a new direction. And so, and what comes out is like many times stronger and more beautiful. And so I think that, yes, the mindset work, how to approach finances, just changing my mentality about, oh, you work hard, you save, you put money in a 401k, like even that, like flipping that on its head was just, it was really like, I'm just like such a different person than I was, I would say 2-3 years ago.
So beautifully said. It's, I mean, there are so many little pearls in there that I hope people hear. Yeah. That, you know, I know we also have done a lot of mindset work, and that kind of work really does lead to the financial abundance as well as emotional abundance. And you'll see that theme, I think, repeated a lot here. So thank you.
And I think, well, just to add, I think you realize that it also like never ends, right? So it's not something you're like, check, I did that. Like there's always, you know, barriers that pop up that you need to work through, or sometimes you have like little setbacks, and, you know, so I'm continuing to look for opportunities to learn and grow. And so it's never ending.
And the community is really, really important to all of us, because it helps us, you know, keep accountable and step up ourselves and just do things to a higher level, because we have the support, but we also have all the examples of what is possible. And you really are an example of what is possible. And I know people are going to love hearing this story. So can you tell them what you've done?
Yeah, so in 2019, I went from the beginning, having one door, which was our old first home that we rented out, to having 19 doors by the end of 2020, and having syndicated a property that was over 100 units in Houston. So I had made some limited LP investments in syndication, and then kind of my overall goal was to hit real estate professional tax status. So I put in hours towards owning, you know, just direct ownership. So a couple of fourplex in Rome, New York, upstate New York is what I started with. I did another fourplex in Tacoma, Washington, working with a group there, and then I ended up picking up 2 duplexes and close by me in Arlington, and partnering with someone in Rome to pick up a few more duplexes by the end of the year. And then I syndicated. I was able to kind of also learn about the world of syndication and network there. And then I syndicated a property that was in Houston before the end of 2020. Wow. So yeah, it was insane. A lot of momentum, a lot of focus, and just a lot of massive action, actually.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, and I really want to talk about the syndication, but first let's quickly go through some of your properties, because you actually went to Central New York, you went to Tacoma, Washington, and then you bought locally. How is it you ended up in 3 different markets so quickly?
Yeah, so really just about community and leveraging and partnerships, right? So because I felt like I was doing it alone, right? It was kind of like, I was like, you know, how can I approach this in a way that's comfortable for me, right? And so a lot of it was about the networking and the relationships I made. So one of the first relationships I made was at like a real estate conference with someone who was heavily invested in Rome, New York, and just kind of getting to know that person, and building up some trust there, and, you know, figuring out that there were opportunities there. And just kind of and working with him on it. And that first property I actually did on my own, but he helped facilitate it. And then later we went on a few properties as partners. But so that was how I kind of came upon that first one, right? And I was so scared to pull the trigger on that first one, right? But once I did, then it was like the floodgates were opened. And then I kind of, you know, I looked at, you know, my models and my examples, and, you know, like looking at you guys, you know, you invested heavily in Washington, and, you know, mostly in Washington and Tacoma. And then you had people in your network that, you know, you trust. And I was like, well, if they trust these people, you know, I can, you know, let me look at this too. And so that's how kind of that opportunity came up. And it was kind of a little bit of a diamond in the rough opportunity. It was an interesting property. They marketed it as a fourplex, but it actually was a single family home with a triplex. So they had like listed it completely wrong. And so it was so interesting. And so it ended up being, I think in the end, more valuable, kind of, you know, it was like a hidden gem type of thing. And so that was pretty cool. And then, when it comes to I was really, like, okay, I want to hit real estate professional tax status. I want to get the hours. And then I think I heard one of the CPAs, like maybe you guys had on, and he was like, oh, you can't just get a syndicate. You can't just do this and get real estate professional tax status. I was like, oh my God, I think I need to pick up a property that's closer to home. Like I'm gonna pick up a property because I don't want any like questioning about whether I'm hitting real estate professional tax status this year. So if I need to work on this, that's how. And actually, I ended up looking at 2 duplexes in the area, and ended up closing on one. I misspoke. I closed on one of those duplexes before 2020, and then the other one I closed on in January 2021. But was looking at that property already in 2020, and so it was. And so that one I completely self-manage. And so but I've learned a lot doing that too. And it's been, crazy all over the place, especially with all the crazy stuff that happened in Texas with the weather. And then, so I've learned a lot doing that. And then I rehabbed, one of those units in 2020. So that was another way that I got hours and, started my business. And then in terms of the syndication kind of came up, that opportunity. And so that was in Houston. And so then I kind of was able to move on that deal as well. So it all came together quite nicely. But it was a lot of work, a lot of effort, and kind of going with the momentum. And also, I'm definitely believe that things happen for a reason. I believe that God's hand, does move through people at times. So it definitely worked in my favor.
So let's talk about syndications, because you're one of the unique, people in this conference who have actually now led a syndication, starting with your direct ownership, and you are now a syndicator. So can you explain for people who don't know what that is, what is a syndication?
So a syndication is just simply, if you take the idea of taking over a duplex or even a single family home, and you renovate it and you rent it out, or you renovate it, rent it out, and then in a couple of years sell it. That's the idea of syndication, except you're multiplying that. So you're applying it to multiple apartment units. So you pool your resources in order to buy a larger apartment complex. So you pool, your human resource, people, you pull financial resources, and you pull leveraging from the bank. So when you're trying to get a mortgage, and you identify a property that you think has the potential to have increased revenue, to push the rents, and sell for a higher price than you're buying it, and you identify a good area. So it's almost like a lot of the principles that you're applying and that we learned in that you teach in your course, and that looking at a single family home or a duplex or a fourplex, you're looking for a good area that you think will grow, will be able to support the rents. You pool your resources and you go in with a group. And so usually there is the general partners, which are leading the deal and leading the business plan. And then there's your limited partners, and those are the people that are investing and not taking an active role there. So these 2 groups come together, they buy an apartment complex, we renovate the units, push rents, sell in 3 to 5 years. And that's kind of the model of syndication. And then there's cash flow component. And then there's also like the cash that you make at sale. So it's good for everybody involved, because your limited partners, if they're not wanting to do active and they don't have the time to invest, they're leveraging the knowledge and the work that the general partners are putting in. And then, it just kind of works really well. So that's been, I started out doing some limited partner investments, and I started out, of course, with education. So I took a course for doing limited investments in syndication. And then I moved up to doing education with how to become a syndicator, and also just networking with other people who syndicate. And so that's kind of how I reached that journey. And actually, so I did my first property in 2020, and I've syndicated already a second property in 2021. So, and hoping to do another one before the end of the year.
So I know a lot of people probably have heard of being a passive investor in a syndication. So that's the LP. What was so interesting to you about being a GP? And are there any pointers you might give to somebody who would think about potentially doing that in the future?
Yeah. So as far as being a GP, what was attractive to me is, I was kind of thinking, at the time, and even now, so thinking about like where was my career in medicine going? Where was I going to go with that? Especially with COVID, like if it was something that I would have to take a break from or kind of walk away from. And so that's when I started focusing on real estate in general. So applying the principles of, getting a duplex or a fourplex, and then just kind of, using leverage and just kind of exponentially, like, the numbers just get better because you're kind of going through the same motions and the same steps. So if you're doing it for 2 units, or you're doing it for 4 units, 8 units, 16 units, 100 units, you're almost doing the same steps, right? And so maybe a small difference I would say is like, maybe like, for example, I do have like a 2-unit duplexes that I'm managing on my own, but like my 4 units, I have a property manager for. So when you're kind of getting up in units, then you're going to use a property manager, and you're going to be managing that property management company. And so, it was almost thinking about it like the same amount of work, but you're scaling. So that made sense to me. And I just kind of, again, just looked to other people who had been doing it and just, soaking what their philosophy was. And I could see it, like it made sense to me. I never considered myself a numbers person, but I'm like, this makes sense. I get that you own something and people need to rent and they need to live somewhere and they pay rent. Like I can wrap my brain around that. And then I can wrap my brain around the fact that, hey, if I own 2 units, wouldn't I make more money if I owned 100 units? And so that's kind of where I was thinking. And my advice to people who want to get involved in that is really just, investing in yourself. Like you have to invest in the education and you have to invest in the relationships. And so those were the 2 big things that I focused on. And that was really what pushed me along and got me further very quickly.
Now, you also mentioned real estate professional tax status, which people have heard about during this conference many times. Was your syndication work, was that helpful to achieving that?
Yes. So syndication work does, count as hours towards becoming a real estate professional. I ultimately felt like it might not be enough to just get one during 2020. So that's why I also kind of went to acquire some properties that were nearby just to make sure that I was building the hours that I needed. But yes, and I feel that, as I gain, more properties as a syndicator, that, that's definitely hours towards real estate professional tax status.
Yeah. And then distinction there is that you're on the GP or the active side. So you're really operating the property. A limited partner who's just investing passively is not going to, those hours, maybe researching the property or whether to put, decide whether to put your money into that syndication. That's just passive, right? So that's not going to really contribute to those hours.
Yeah. And I think that's the difference, so as a GP, I'm involved in the phone calls, the weekly phone calls, like sometimes more than once a week, working on different projects like CapEx projects, working on fundraising, working on water conservation, utilities management. So these are kind of all some of the things that I've worked on as a GP and are currently working on. And so it is definitely an active component because you are managing, you are putting into effect the business plan. And, I'm doing it with my team, but it's something that it takes, it does take work. And, you're responsible for this investment, for this baby. And, so you want to make sure that it's thriving.
So with all you have going, what are you planning in your real estate portfolio, let's say a year from now or 5 years from now? What does that look like?
Yeah, I think for me, especially with syndication, I'm thinking more my growth is going to be there. One thought was maybe adding an Airbnb to my portfolio. So that was something that I was approaching and thinking about, been crunching the numbers on. And then thinking about picking up another or working on another syndication before the end of the year is one of my big goals. And then we'll see about picking up some more properties. It has to make sense. It's been, the market has been, really great, in terms of, selling and just very active now. But it's been a little bit competitive. So we want to kind of really approach things with caution and just make sure that we're running numbers, that are accurate and reasonable. And, lending has, taken interesting turns. And so there's a lot to learn. Like when you learn, how things are working, then it's like, oh, then you learn all these nuances. So it's similar to medicine in that way, like the learning never stops. But it's definitely interesting and exciting. And so I'm part-time, and I also do, I'm doing teaching as part of that part-time. And so kind of, been thinking, at what point do I, everything's kind of ramping up, and I'm like, at what point am I going to pull back a little bit from medicine, and what does that look like? And, I luckily, because I'm ER, I can always kind of maintain like a part-time status. So we'll see where that takes me. But everything is pretty good right now when it comes to my real estate business and where I'm at professionally. I work at an academic center, so I do teaching but part-time. So it's a good life balance in that way.
Awesome. Any closing advice for somebody considering investing in real estate?
So I would say if you're considering it, do it and invest in yourself first. So you have to invest in your education and invest in the networking and the relationships. So I think if that's where you put your efforts, that will go a long way. You don't have to do it all alone. There's a community and people who are willing and excited to help. And and there's different ways to do it. So I think, learn as much as you can, invest in yourself and kind of explore all those opportunities.
Thank you so much, Jess, for spending the time with us and being an inspiration for others.
Thank you. Again, it's, a lot has been, you've contributed to my growth, immensely, and I'm grateful for that. And it's been an amazing couple of years in that sense.